Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. I am Jackson, and I'm joined here, as always, by the man who is ready to talk some balls. Kyle, how are you doing?
Doing fantastic. Back from vacation, so feeling a little refreshed. Did get sick on vacation, so that didn't help. But overall, doing pretty good.
Yeah, okay. Well, sorry to hear you got sick. Glad that seemed like Kyle, I was thinking about it. I think this might be the longest time we've gone without talking to each other, right? I don't think we've ever missed 2 weeks in a row before.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
So
it
in
was
like
a very
4
long trip.
years, the first time we spent multiple weeks on. It's kind of weird to think about. I was just thinking about it like as I was preparing for the show. Like outside of my fiance, I think you're probably the person I talk to, not like most regularly, but like I never go very far apart without talking to you.
It's a consistent relationship. I would agree with that.
Yeah, exactly. Kyle, I'm happy to be back. I think today is the last official day of the offseason. I think tomorrow is the preseason. Technically, there's been a preseason game, but tomorrow we're officially in the preseason.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Did you watch the Hall of Fame game? Because I did.
I tried. I make videos on this stuff. I was able to make a video on the kickoff stuff, and that was at least something. Kyle, I made one film study. It was a Davis Mills film study. It was a rough attempt to get content out that day.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I will say, I didn't watch any XFL ever. And so I'm basically just going to go into the season surprised on this kickoff thing because I saw a picture of it, but I still don't really understand the concept. So we're just going to see what happens.
Yeah,
I have no opinion on it.
Okay, no opinion. I think I don't hate the idea behind it. I think it's they need to work on the camera work. I think because they cut to like a wide shot and we're just watching 20 guys stand around until someone catches the ball. I think they need to go for a close up of the ball carrier. I think that would do a lot of good.
Yeah, that would definitely help. Just don't ask anybody from the Olympics to help with camera work because that has been just a disaster this entire
Has it been? I haven't watched any Olympics. They can't make me watch the Olympics, Kyle.
Why? It's fun.
I would be interested in it if I've always said this. I just want to I want to turn on the Olympics and then they tell me, okay, this is the quarterfinals or this is the I just want to know what I never know what's happening.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. I was watching games yesterday. It was good. U.S. women's on to the final for women's soccer.
Okay,
so that's exciting.
Well, I thought women's soccer we do. Why do we just do so well in women's soccer and so poorly in men's soccer?
Well, there was decades much. Other countries had like a decade's head start on us, multiple decades head start on us in men's soccer compared to women's soccer.
Did it not happen with women's soccer? I don't. What am I doing? Everyone's turned off the show. We need to get these back on track. NFC East, Kyle, one of the most exciting divisions to talk about year after year. Always gets strong opinions out of people. Do you want to first let's just set it up because we haven't done a show in a bit. If you're new here, don't know exactly how this works, usually we don't ramble for 4 minutes about women's soccer before getting into the show, but what we do is we go through each team. Kyle is going to rank them 4 through 1. That is the order where we will talk about these teams. We'll go position by position. I'm going to give a tier rank to each position group, and then I'll give a final record prediction. And we also have a poll that is currently up on the community tab. I just put that up. So vote on who you think could win the division. Yeah, a lot of good stuff. Kyle, why don't you want to just jump into it?
Yeah, let's go right into this. I did, the NFC East, it is interesting because it's like, I don't think a lot of like outside, it's like a group of teams that teams outside of the division don't like because they're on TV a lot,
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't like these teams, but we always talk about these teams, and these teams do not like each other. So it's at least an exciting division for that. All the games are rivalry games. It's a classic division. All these teams dislike each other. It's going to be a fantastic season again. So I'm looking forward to this. I do have it as the 5th best division in football. It is not it's no longer the NFC East. It hasn't been for a few years, but it's still not a strong division. I do think there are still 2 pretty good teams, potentially really good teams. I'm not sure if I'm willing to put either of these teams on the Super Bowl tier, though. We'll talk about that. So it's going to be interesting to see how those 2 teams finish out because I do think that's mainly what everyone's going to talk about with these 2 teams, with this division especially. But there are some interesting things with the bottom 2 teams here. Starting with number 4, though, one of those bottom 2 teams, The New York Football Giants.
Yeah.
You know, I think they did some interesting things this offseason. I'm really excited for Malik Neighbors. But I just don't think, I think they could have a very, very good pass rush, maybe one of the better ones in the league. Outside of that, I don't really know what else I'm looking forward to. So, New York Giants at number 4. We'll see how the season goes.
Yeah, could be a fun season if you're a Giants fan. There's certain aspects of this team that are fun, but I agree. I think this is an obvious choice for the fourth in the division as of right now. Part of it comes down to the quarterback, Daniel Jones, who I'm not giving tier 5 quarterback play. I'm a tier 4. Daniel Jones is the poster child for tier 4 quarterback play. He's not a bad quarterback. He's just not someone you pay $40 million to. I'm not sure if you heard Kyle. He got $40 million a year. It was the whole thing. But Brian Dable.
Have we talked about that before on here?
I think we mentioned it. I don't. Yeah, it flew under the radar. But Brian Dable also. I'm going tier 3 coach. He's a weird situation where like he could be a great coach. He also could be out of a job by the time this year is over. Like, it's very similar to Arthur Smith's tenure, right? Where Arthur Smith had a really good first year, and then or it wasn't a really good first year, but like a promising first year. Dable was a lot better his first year, and then Smith just kind of fell off the handle. Hopefully, it doesn't happen for Giants fans, but if this season does go poorly, people are gonna point the finger at him to some degree, and most coaches. Well, I mean, he's won a playoff game, so he has that going for him. But usually, if your second and third year result in sub 500 teams, usually you're not long for this world.
Yeah, it's tough. I thought he did a really good job the first season. Although, as we talked about a lot, that team kind of overperformed its expectations. That probably wasn't a 9-win team or whatever it was. Definitely wasn't a 9-win team, but they got those wins, so you got to give them the credit for that.
Okay, they had a tie too in there.
Yeah, so that there was that, and then this past season, it kind of fell off a cliff. I don't like. There was a lot of people ready for him to be fired after last season, which I thought was a little crazy. I mean, I get it to an extent. This is the National Football League. That kind of is how business operates here nowadays. But at the same time, like, I don't know how much you actually expect from like having Tommy DeVito play quarterback for you week after week. So. I don't know how fair that was. I know he became a bit of a folk hero, but he's not an NFL quarterback. So we'll see how it goes again this season. Like you said, it's not an inspiring group with him and Daniel Jones, but if I were to pick one of those two, I'm definitely taking Dayball.
The Giants did make an effort to help out the receiving game, because that's been the biggest issue for years at this point, is the receiving game, specifically with the drafting of Malik Neighbors, who I think a lot of people loved. Some people even thought he was the best receiver in this draft class. Most had him at number 2 behind Marvin Harrison Jr. It's still not a great receiving room without him. You have Isaiah Hodgins, who's shown flashes. You have Wan'Dale Robinson, who's shown flashes. Darius Slayton. Maybe you get something out of Jalen Hyatt this year, but this is still not very good. Kyle, I can't. If Malik Neighbors is an elite receiver, this isn't the tier 5 receiving room. I can't just assume he's going to be elite though, just because I really like him as a prospect. I'm going tier 5 right now.
Yeah. No, I think it's completely fair. This, if he doesn't work out, this is the worst receiving core in the league still.
Right.
And, they've tried a lot of different things. It's not for the lack of trying. They had good receivers for a long time. Mm-hmm. A lot of those guys kind of moved on. Obviously, the Odell Beckham thing played out, Victor Cruz, all those different guys. Hasn't really worked out. They haven't been able to replace any of those guys, basically, is what it comes down to. They paid big money for Darren Waller. Darren Waller, I think, has more music videos and touchdowns than the last year. I'd have to look up the math on that. But yeah, I mean, it's not great. I mean, here's the thing. If Malik Neighbors is awesome this year, and like, let's say Malik Neighbors, who I really like too, I think I was big on him in his draft prospect. Marvin Harrison is Marvin Harrison Jr., excuse me. But I did have him as like pretty close, which is saying something. Let's just say Malik Neighbors has the Justin Jefferson like rookie season, and he's that good. This is still a bad receiving core. Like, this is still probably like Malik Neighbors having a Justin Jefferson like season might make this a tier 4 receiving core. Like, that's kind of the situation we're dealing with. So it's not great. All of these guys have had like mini flashes. Like Wan'Dale Robinson has had some nice games. Darius Slayton has had some nice games. Isaiah Hodgins has had some moments. I do like Jalen Hyatt still. I mean, he was like 28th in yards per reception his rookie year. I think he's got some nice stuff to him. But at the same time, I can't tell if these guys have had moments because they're like actually kind of good or have potential, or because somebody has to catch the ball. Like, I don't know what the situation is here with those guys, and I'm kind of leaning more towards like somebody has to catch the ball eventually.
What was that stat you pulled out about Jalen Hyatt?
Oh, 28th in yards per reception. Yeah,
That's quite the hey, he's not bad. 28th in yards per reception.
I mean, it's a small sample size, but he's been billed as the big play guy. How'd you get that number?
What was the thought process for you getting that number and then saying it on the podcast?
I was just looking at numbers on the ESPN thing.
Okay, I don't know if that's moving the needle a lot for me, Kyle.
It's probably not, but he is billed as the big play guy, and he did have some big plays.
Sure. Yes. Definitely. No. Receiving core could be tough. Running back room also, losing Barkley is going to hurt for sure. They did add Devin Singletary, who, I mean, I don't know. I don't think is the worst running back in the world, but I also don't love the depth here. Tyrone Tracy Jr. is slated to be the backup. He was a 5th round pick. I think there's probably worse running back rooms. I'm not going to go tier 5, but this is still tier 4 for me.
Yeah. It's probably closer to tier 5 for me. I mean, and it's
you could talk me into it. Yeah.
Like, stack up this skill position group to the other teams in the league. Like, this is probably, like, even without even looking at the rest of it, it's got to be close to 32, right?
It's not great. I like Singletary a bit. I think Singletary's all right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's fine. He did all right last year on Houston, and that offensive line was not helpful, right?
Yeah.
That's where he was last year? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
exactly. He's been a consistently, I mean, I would say he's like at times been like a tier 3, like running back, like by him. Again, I don't love the depth here, so it still hurt it regardless. But like, I don't think he's not the worst player in the world.
Yeah. No, I agree. No, he's fine. He's fine. I just think he's replaceable, and that's why he's bounced around the last couple of years.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the offensive line, so Evan Neal's on the PUP list right now. That might be a good thing for the Giants, given how, there's no getting around it. It's been tough for him out there. Andrew Thomas is awesome. Jermaine Illuminor slated to be the right tackle now. He probably should just start at tackle. They said that they're not going to try Neal at guard. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what the logic is. It feels like having him be a guard would be a good idea. John Michael Schmitz is slated to be the center. He was PFF's lowest graded eligible center last year, so that's not ideal. You have Greg Van Roten, who's good, and then you have some, several depth pieces at guard. Aaron Stinney, John Runyon, Marcus McKeith. I don't know exactly who's going to be the starter. Aaron Stinney did start the Super Bowl for Tampa Bay and win. So you have that, some championship pedigree for all the big games the Giants will be playing this year at the guard position. It's a weird offensive line because if Illuminor is playing, you don't have a great center, but you can kind of work around that. I actually don't really hate this offensive line. But if Neal comes back and plays, that's an issue. I think I'm going to go tier 3 offensive line. Is that crazy?
A little bit, but, I guess it could be passable. I will say, like, for a team that for many, many years also felt like it couldn't block along with not finding receivers, it's not as bad as it was the past few seasons. And maybe that's why we're a little bit more optimistic on it. But I still wouldn't classify it as a great situation outside of Andrew Thomas. So, if Thomas could stay on the field, he obviously, he improves this offensive line a lot on his own. He might be the best left tackle in the league. But yeah, they have a lot. They still have some holes here that I think they need to figure out. And it starts at the middle there with that center position. And, Illuminor's, he's a pretty good tackle. I don't think he's anything to write home about. So it just comes down to, can some of these options work out in interior?
You know what? I think you're right. I think I'm gonna drop it to tier 4. My concern is that Evan Neal is gonna come back and they're gonna start him again. Because which you probably should do, right? Like, you're not being competitive right now. Might as well see if you have anything in him.
Yeah, and he could get better.
Yeah.
Once again, this is what we saw with Andrew Thomas, so maybe it does get better for him too.
Well, Andrew Thomas was, I think he was pretty good year 2. This would be an extreme of wait until year 3 to be good.
Yeah, no, I get it. So we'll see.
We will see. Kyle, let's talk some positives. Let's talk about this defensive line. Something that they're building through the trenches, specifically one of them, the defensive line. And while I wasn't crazy about the Brian Burns trade, thought it's a bit of money to give up for him. He's a good player. He's a really good player. Kayvon Thibodeau did not have a great year last year. Still had a decent amount of sacks, though. It was a really weird year. His advanced stats were pretty significantly down, though. But he was better in his rookie year, so we'll see if that bounces back. Dexter Lawrence could he end up being just the undisputed best interior defensive lineman in football after this year? It's certainly possible. I would like for a little more depth on this defensive line personally. I think that there's some room for improvement in certain aspects here, but I mean they have the stars for sure. And then for the linebackers, you have Bobby Okereke, who I think should be pretty good. They added Isaiah Simmons. We'll see if he does anything. Micah McFadden's also there at the linebacker position. So I don't know. The front seven should be pretty solid. I think the run defense. I'm gonna be optimistic here, Kyle. I'm gonna be pro Giants. I'm gonna go tier 2 run defense and tier 1 pass rush. Why not? I'm gonna trust Thibodeau bounces back.
Yeah, I'm gonna bet on Thibodeau bouncing back too. I think he could be a breakout candidate for me this year. So I don't want to say breakout because he was like a top 5 pick, but he could be I think he could have a big year, and I think he's capable of it. I think he's got the talent for it. I think having Burns there is also going to help him, and having Lawrence obviously has helped him and will continue to help him because he's one of the best in the league. So that all coming together is going to be really nice. I like that group. I mean, they, like you said, they've spent a lot of resources on it. They just gave Dexter Lawrence a huge check. They gave Brian Burns, they gave up picks for Brian Burns and gave him a huge check. And they, spent a high draft pick on Kayvon Thibodeau. They've used resources. They've invested a lot in those positions in that as their priority. And it should be good. The expectation is that group should be good because they've invested in it.
Meanwhile, Kyle, on the other side of the coin, the back half of this defense, do the Giants know that secondary is a thing?
You would hope so.
Is it one of those things like you're playing Madden and like you're trying to fill out a certain position and you forget like secondary and it's like, oh god, now I have Cordell Flott that sounds like a fake name. He's gonna be a starter.
Yeah, it's a rough group. It's really a rough group. Obviously they're hoping for something out of Deonte Banks this season, having a good year too. But there's a lot of guys to throw at it. Feels like in this defense.
Yeah, it's and again, it's kind of what we talked about with neighbors. It's like if Banks hits, like this still isn't a very good secondary. Like it's easily a tier 5 secondary. You have, is Trey Hawkins going to take a step forward? I guess Trey Herndon had, PFF was a fan of him and his small sample size last year for what that's worth, I suppose. Jason Pinnock and Jalen Mills. Okay, that's not the worst safety tandem in the world. But yeah, I don't know. It's tier 5, Kyle.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. And this is it's not the worst. It's a tough situation. There's a lot of tier 4s and 5s on this team right now outside of the defensive line. And that's kind of what we're dealing with. This is an overhaul project, it feels like, for the Giants now. But that was kind of the weird thing about some of the offseason moves. Like you said, I think Brian Burns is going to be a positive player. He's still good. But at the same time, you're paying a lot of money for a guy who's maybe going to add 1 win for you for a team that's probably going to win like 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, and that's where I have them projected. I'm going 5-12. I just think it's not a good team. I mean, there's too many holes on this roster. There's some really good stuff, like I said. Front 7 should be a lot of fun to watch defensively. You got Daniel Jones. How boring can a team be with Daniel Jones? But it's just not a great team.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. So it's going to be fascinating to see, but yeah, it feels like many years away, and they're going to have to draft a quarterback, and I imagine they're going to be quarterback scouting pretty early in the season.
It seems likely. On the bright side, if you cut Daniel Jones after this year, you still only have to pay him $20 million. You got
Good
that.
contract. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always good. Yeah, but the Giants, they bought in. They bought into that playoff win. It was at least you had that season. Sure, it was fun. Kyle, there are three teams from. Oh, I forgot to put the banner up. Sorry to I wouldn't be one of these shows if I didn't forget to put the banner up. Sorry if you're a Giants fan just tuning in now. My bad. We just talked about you. But yeah, let's move on, Kyle. There are three teams left to talk about. Where are you going?
This podcast favorite team, the Washington Balls, is next.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they've done a lot. Obviously, they have some very interesting skill position talent. They drafted Jaden Daniels with the second overall pick. We saw what this team did with the second overall pick before in the past. Shout out to Robert Griffin III. Could this be kind of reigniting that? I don't know. But there are some interesting players here on both sides of the ball. You know, I like the skill position talent. They add a couple guys on the offensive line. You know, they have a few players on defense that I really like too. I think it could be a very interesting team. There's still just a few too many holes for me to really buy in. And, you know, it's going to be asking a lot for Jaden Daniels to lead a playoff team in year one. You know, I know we've seen some rookie quarterbacks really spoil us and be able to do that. I just think it's a tall task, and I think there are some concerns for him, and I think there are some concerns, but overall, I do have this team finishing third.
Also, I forgot to mention it. 9% of the people in the poll gave the Giants, said the Giants would win the NFC. It's a bit high, 9%.
Yeah, that does feel a little bit high.
Yeah, definitely. The Commanders should be interesting, right? I mean, we think about this situation of the, this division. I feel like these teams, kind of part of why this division's been a little bit, I thought people get annoyed that we keep seeing them on prime time, is it's been kind of stagnant, right? I mean, the Eagles had some variety for a bit, but like the Cowboys have pretty much been the Cowboys for the past like 10 years at this point. The Giants have kind of been the Giants, and Washington, the Ron Rivera Washington Commanders / football team / whatever has been kind of the same team a bit as well. At least we have a unique, a new quarterback, new head coach. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's very much interesting. I don't know if it'll work, but it is very much interesting. But yeah, so we do have some new faces here,
Mm-hmm.
and I did like Jaden Daniels in the draft. There are still some concerns. It's an older quarterback who had kind of that one-off season. Now, we did see it work with Joe Burrow, but just because it works for one guy, it doesn't work for every guy. He's a much different kind of quarterback too, And I just think it's so interesting seeing him like move up to the next level. And what he was able to do last season was really impressive. But I also look at a lot of years that he had in the past in college, and the throwing ability wasn't quite what it was until last season. So it has improved a lot, and his reading of the game improved a lot over that last season. And how much is that going to be able to translate to the next level, or how much of that was mastering the Brian Kelly offense? I think that's going to be the most interesting thing with Jaden Daniels. And I am excited to see him because he is a very exciting player at his best. But, there are some concerns there.
Yeah, and I was probably lower on him than most coming out of college. You do have to wonder if there is some like Kenny Pickettness to it, him as a prospect of like you finally getting good just after being in college for a while. He is a bit of an older prospect, and I'm quite frankly, my biggest concern is I just think he takes way too many hits and has to protect himself better. But it's very, very exciting and could be pro ready, which is nice. Also with Dan Quinn. Okay, listen, I mean, these guys are both going to be tier 5s right now because a rookie quarterback and a Dan Quinn. But it's I do feel like, at least for Dan Quinn, he's an adult in the room, right? This isn't going to be a complete disaster for a young quarterback to step into.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the one thing that was so uninspiring about this hiring was they just had the adult in the room. Like,
yeah,
if they just kept Ron Rivera, would this have felt any different?
It is a fair, like if Dan Quinn and Ron Rivera are in the room together, how do you tell the difference? Like if you're blindfolded, like how you're not going to know.
Yeah. I just feel like that, they felt like they needed a change, and then their change was doing the exact same thing. It felt like maybe, I don't know. I think if I remember correctly, they asked a few people for the job first, and they, a few guys said no. Like I think Mike Vrabel was offered the job at one point. Maybe Vrabel just didn't want it, and that was their first choice. But yeah, I just felt like a very uninspiring hire at that point. That being said, like I'm not the biggest Dan Quinn fan, but he has had success in this league. We'll see if he can do it again.
The receiving core is interesting for Washington as well. You have, it's kind of one of those things. I feel people have said it's a good receiving core for forever, but then like it just hasn't really like been that. Like it hasn't like it kind of always it hasn't lived up to the names sometimes. Terry McLaurin has. Terry McLaurin's been consistently really good. Jahan Dotson's been very up and down so far in his career. And then you have some interesting depth players like Zach Ertz is here. I guess he's slated to be the number one tight end. If Amade Zacchaeus, who has shown flashes, we'll see. And then it's just like a bunch of like, Jamison Crowder still in the league and playing for the Commanders, if you were curious. You have Dimey Brown. And then Luke McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's brother, is a wide receiver for the Commanders. You also have Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler. Really, I think a really good running back tandem. So I'll go tier 2 running back room. But this is going to be I'm still going tier 4 wide receiver room. Again, wide receiving tiers always feel harsh, but like I like Terry McLaurin a lot. I do have some concerns depth wise.
Yeah, no, I think it's completely justifiable. Jahan Dotson was someone I really liked out of college. I think he's shown some real flashes, but now he's stepping up into that true number 2 role because they did have Curtis Samuel there for a few years. He's really got to, it's going to be hit the point where, you want a little more than like a 500-yard, 5-touchdown season. You need a little bit more out of him than that. We'll see if he can make that leap. There are some interesting players here as far as the third guy, but, someone really has to step up there, whether it is Jamison Crowder, just, having another Jamison Crowder-like season. De'Ami Brown was a guy we kind of had expectations for that hasn't really worked out. And then McCaffrey is obviously the name is carrying a lot more weight there, but he is a pretty interesting player. He had a really, really good last couple seasons at Rice. As a receiver, he started as a quarterback at Nebraska and was a incredible athlete, and obviously moved to receiver later. So it worked out for him, and it's he's shown real potential, and like I said, he's just a really, really good athlete and comes from a family of good athletes. So it could be very interesting to see if he works out at that position, because I think he could be pretty good.
Yeah, and there's one of those things too where it's like, I don't know. Has a brother who's great at football. Sometimes those guys end up being good. Like sometimes it happens that way.
Yeah,
like the TJ Watt thing,
right? Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if he is a really good player. I don't think he's going to be like a star or anything. He's not going to turn obviously into. I don't think this is a TJ Watt situation, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's a pretty good receiver for a number of years.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. The offensive line is one of the more unique groups you'll see, because there's some real bright spots. So Sam Cosmi is like what PFF is just like, they'll go to war for him. It seems like he's someone who he was their 4th highest graded guard last year. It's kind of the only year he's been that highly graded, but they've been right about things before. Certainly, Nick Algiretti seems to be the other guy that is slated to start for them. You also at the guard position, you also have Tyler Badaz, who will be the center. Still can't pronounce his name. So you got guys from different teams coming here as well. So there's kind of some concern there. Tackles, Andrew Wiley is the tackle who, again, is a fine tackle. Didn't deserve all the criticism he got for that Super Bowl loss. Second time I'm bringing up the Super Bowl that the Buccaneers won, and it won't be the last, Kyle. The other tackle, though, Kyle, I don't know if you have your notes up or if you've researched the tackles. Do you know who is currently slated to be the other tackle?
I see Cornelius Lucas.
Okay, yeah, there seems to be some debate. The site I use says Brandon Coleman, who is currently a undrafted free agent. So there's some concerns at the other tackle position.
Yeah, it's kind of 2 good players and then shrug of the shoulders, which is not a great position to be in for an offensive line that usually requires 5 players.
Yes, that's unfortunate. I would say 2 good players, a solid player in Andrew Wiley, and then a shrug. So that's a tier 5 receiving room, or excuse me, tier 5 offensive line. There's too many just black holes here.
Yeah, that's the biggest concern here, I think, for this team, especially as we talk about Jaden Daniels, and we talked about it. He's a bit of a risk taker, especially with his body. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he's the kind of guy I want behind a bad offensive line in this as of right now. Now, granted, maybe Brandon Coleman is good. Maybe he is good. It could happen. Weirder things have happened before in this league, right? So maybe he is good or something like that, and they figure out the left guard position. That being said, I don't know if I want this quarterback specifically with those question marks, because he's going to take the hits, and he's not going to be afraid to take the hits, which is admirable, but you need him on the field. He's your most valuable asset. You just spend a lot of assets to get Jaden Daniels. You want to keep him healthy and keep him on the field. I think there is a good chance he doesn't play the full season.
Yeah, I'm very concerned. Marcus Mariota's a good backup, but you don't want to see him on the field, certainly. Kyle, this defense, good linebackers.
Very
good linebackers, good interior defensive linemen. It's great up the middle. There's not a lot else. This is very much you have Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen up the middle, and you added Zerhan Newton. Whoa, great interior defensive line. Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu. Okay, tell me more. Well, not too much more, because you have at the edge rushers, it's Cleveland Ferrell is slated to be a starter, so that's not concerning. Dorrance Armstrong, the other one currently at the edge position. You also have Jamon Davis at the linebacker position as well, who should be solid, I would think. The secondary, you have Percy Butler and Derek Forrest at the safety position. For the corners, I think they're hoping for a step forward by Emmanuel Forbes, which isn't impossible. We've seen that happen. Get a new scheme, things can happen. They added Mike Sandstrill. They drafted him. He, with pick 50, that definitely could work. And then you get Benjamin St. Juste, who has shown flashes at times to step up. It's possible. You also have Jeremy Chin that they added as well. So there's some options, but Kyle, this is I'm gonna go tier 2 run defense, and the only reason why it's not tier 1 is because of the edge rushers. But this is tier 5 secondary or tier 5 coverage unit, I should say, and a tier 5 pass rush.
Yeah, their linebackers might be their best coverage guys.
Yeah.
That being said, we've seen Forrest had a good year. Jeremy Chin has had moments too in the league. That's a guy that they could, have a reclamation project with. There are a few players there that are interesting. And, Emmanuel Forbes was someone I liked in college. I could see him getting better too. And like you said, St. Juste isn't a bad option too. So there is room for this group to grow. It's just asking a lot for all of these guys to kind of work out the way they want. And even then, if they turn into an okay coverage unit, there's just not a lot of guys getting after the quarterback is the issue. You have Jonathan Allen in the interior, who is a good player, but then you're also looking at Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler is potentially your best pass rushers. That's not a strong option. That's not great.
Yeah, so I don't like this Commanders team. I have them with a 14-3 project. 14-3. That'd be a 4-13 projected record. What am I missing? Because I look at the poll, 18% of people are picking them to win the division. There seems to be, and part of that is it's a weaker division. Is it just the Daniels thing?
I think it's looking at the quarterback and the receivers and saying that's going to work.
But
which maybe
is it?
Does.
I mean, if it does, how good is this team going to be?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't see a scenario where this is a 10-win team.
Yeah.
I don't. I think it could be a 7-win team if Daniels is pretty good. He's got McLaurin. That's going to put up some numbers. I think this running back room is going to be very interesting too. They're going to use Eckler a lot in the passing game. So there are some things there. But at the same time, I still think a lot just has to work out for this team.
Yeah. It's I think probably the best way you could make it's some of the young guys in the secondary just take a step forward. That's possible. This, if Dan Quinn, but again, kind of like we were saying earlier, what's the difference between Dan Quinn and Ron Rivera?
Not much. Not much. Although we have seen Dan Quinn have some good defenses the past couple of years. Don't look at the playoff game last season for the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess maybe that fixes some things. That is a possibility. And then they figure things out on offense. But yeah, it's still a lot of if this happens. And that's just not something I love. I don't love living in the world of if.
But that also is what makes predictions so hard, because sometimes the ifs do happen. Sometimes that does work out, and then the people the Commanders fans that said that all these ifs were going to happen now feel like they feel like they're geniuses and we're idiots, which might not be untrue, but still.
Yeah, that is the It's happened before. It happened with the Texans last year. It happens with every team. Maybe this is the team that makes the leap with the young quarterback, but I still think it's going to take a little bit more time.
Yeah, absolutely. Bengals another team that comes to my mind, but yeah, Kyle. Again, usually for the past couple of years now, there's been kind of two tiers of teams: the bottom two and the top two. I think you could go either way. I don't think that I could see you making an argument for either of these teams. Which one will you say is going to finish second?
The Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay, you just can't quit the Cowboys.
The moment we've all been waiting for. That being said, I don't know if either of these teams are Super Bowl contender. You know, I'm not really to put either of these teams in that tier yet. I'd have to see a lot more this season. I'm staying shocked though. I'm going to stay with exactly what we had last season as far as the rankings go. Like the Eagles are still a good team. Like this is still, I think, going to be a playoff team again. And the stink of last year, I think, just did a number on me that I'm not ready to just pass it by yet. I could see a lot of things kind of working out in the Eagles' favor. I could see Darius Slay having a bounce back season, Quinyon Mitchell stepping in and fixing this secondary. Those are two things they desperately need. That being said, I just don't know if they did enough to fix the issues they had last season. I still don't love this safety group, even though they did bring back CJ Gardner-Johnson after a year off in Detroit. Maybe that works, but then Gardner-Johnson also wasn't awesome last season. You know, every Eagles fan in the world took to social media last season to complain about their linebackers, and you would act like they had the worst linebacker room in the history of the NFL, and their solution was Devin White and Zach Bond. So I'm not overly thrilled with that either, and drafting Jeremiah Trotter, I should say, too. So we'll see on that, and I also think they got worse on the defensive line. I think they got worse at the edge rusher position, which was their strength for a number of years. Granted, it wasn't that great last season, and that was part of the problem too. But I just think there's too many holes there. I think there are too many holes in the offense still. I still have some questions about things, but they still are going to be good, and I think this is a double-digit win team.
Yeah, there's certainly. I mean, to me, we'll just jump into it because I think that it does kind of all start with the two most important people in the organization. You have Jalen Hurts, who last year were like, this guy's like a tier 1 quarterback. Like, look at what he's doing. He was second in MVP voting, and then it just wasn't, it just wasn't as good last year. It wasn't horrible, but wasn't as good last year. Nick Sirianni was horrible. I mean, like the way that team quit on it last year. I do have to say, I kept talking about how many missed tackles they had down the stretch. A lot of that was James Bradbury. James Bradbury was really, I mean, he was pulling his weight in the missed tackle department. But it wasn't just that. There was kind of a lack of drive. I felt like the Eagles didn't want it at times. So for the tiers, like, how do I rank these guys? I'm going to keep Sirianni in tier 3. I'm going to keep Hurts in tier 2. These guys have both shown to be tier 1s at their respective, positions at times. But like, the brakes could fall off real fast here. Like Sirianni could be looked at as a great head coach after this year, or be fired.
He could be the first coach fired, honestly.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
It wouldn't shock me. So it's going to be very fascinating. Now there's a ton of expectations, and you know what? They gave him another year by letting him go. They gave him another year by letting go of the coordinators, and the coordinator hires last offseason were a miss. So maybe it works, but maybe it doesn't. And then, you know what? They can't fire the coordinators again. You're the next one out, man. So we'll see how that goes. A lot of expectations on him. I don't really know. I don't know exactly how I feel about Nick Sirianni. I want to see a little bit more data on this. I do think he is a better motivator than what we saw last season. But that being said, there was a huge quit factor to the team. And it feels a lot like Doug Peterson right before him, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, completely agree. There's some really good weapons here. Really good weapons. The receiving room, if it stays healthy, is like incredible, right? AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert as the 1, 2, 3. Like, that's great. You added Johnny Wilson. Could he be a interesting depth piece? Sure, why not? John Ross. I feel like I like having a burner on this team. I like that. Again, it's not moving the needle, but like, it's something I like. The issue is that guys aren't going to stay healthy. There's going to be injuries. And that's kind of been my critique of the Eagles for a while, is I wish that they would go out and just get a third receiver. They don't really have, because I mean, in that playoff game, against Tampa Bay, another playoff win with Tampa Bay. I won't stop, Kyle. I'm going to keep bringing these things up. I don't have many to choose from. I got to bring them up when I can. But I mean, in that game, you saw like AJ Brown was hurt, and they just couldn't get guys open. Like that was it. So I think that, I would like them to have another. It's still a tier 2 receiving room. I still really like it. And for the running back room, it's kind of similar. Where like Saquon's obviously awesome. Like he does have a bit of an injury history. I do like kind of Gainwell as a depth piece though. So they do have the depth that I would that I like. Maybe it's still a hot take. I'm going to be a little stingy with the tier 1s though. I'm going to go tier 2 for both.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's justifiable. I do like Will Shipley. He is a guy in high school that got Christian McCaffrey comparisons, and not just because they're white. Although I think that played a part.
Probably. Yeah, I'm going to assume that's not unrelated.
But yeah, he also could catch the ball in the backfield. He could do some different things. I think there's so many problems at Clemson. I think he could be a lot better than what he showed there at Clemson. So, yeah, I think that's an interesting running back room. I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of the better running offenses in football, not named Baltimore, just because of that Hurts and Barkley combination. And, they're going to do their Eagle stuff for short yardage things, and that's going to work at times. I don't know, man. I hated watching this team last year. I really did. There's just something not inherently fun about watching a team play for 4th and 1. And there's something that this team had 2 strategies: get to 3rd down and throw the ball up to AJ Brown. I don't blame them. Or get the ball to 3rd and short, 4th and short, and run the ball up the middle with their push play.
They're basically they're the Daryl Morey version NFL, right? Where it's like it's threes or layups. It's all like touch push or like downfield to AJ Brown.
Yeah, and it sucks to watch. This isn't a fun team to watch. That's my problem. All this talent, and I find this team unwatchable. So I don't know. I'm being too much of a hater now, but I have some questions about this offense. I want to see some more creativity because, like I said, I just don't think you can play football that way. It's just too easy eventually to game plan around things. And I don't think football can be run like basketball in that sort of sense because the defense can set. A defense can always set. A defense is always going to have an opportunity to call a play, set up, and do their thing. So I just don't think you can run football that way. And I just want to see a little more creativity when we know this team has talent. We know it can manufacture it. Granted, a lot of it was Goddard, getting hurt and not being as good as he was last season. So if that could help, but I just think that they could better utilize some of this talent.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning when this team was healthy offensively, their offense was so good they were able to go 11-1 with that awful defense on the other side.
Yeah, I mean that's true. Yeah, it did help.
Yeah, and that defense was bad the whole season. So, but still, I think they were kind of a flawed 11-1 team at that. But still, the rest of the Eagles, the offensive line has for years been just the cream of the crop. It's been like 5 stars, but you lost Kelsey, so you still have Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata. I still think that's the best tackle tandem in the league. Landon Dickerson is a really good guard. Cam Jurgens looks like he's going to actually they might have him move to center, but either way, he's an interior guy. And then it's who's the other interior player? You have Tyler Steen, who you could go with. You have Trevor Keegan, a 5th round pick. Matt Hennessy is a guy you could decide to call on. Even Kai Becton is in the mix as kind of a flyer, perhaps. I don't love that 1 weak spot, and I do wonder, how does it look without Kelsey? I think that's interesting because, Jurgens was kind of the weak spot in previous years. Not that he's bad, but he's just kind of a fine player. At least that's what he was, last year, the 1 year he really had playing time. So if he's just sort of a fine player, and now you have a hole, okay, this is starting to look a little worse. So I'm still going to go tier 2. If part of it is it's the Eagles, you kind of trust them to figure it out. And there are still, again, Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, it's fantastic. But I think tier 2 feels fair.
Right.
What's that?
And Dickerson. They still have 3 stars.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, so, yeah, I agree with that. I am interested. They talk so much about how important Kelsey was to this team. And, he is a great center. People wanted to call him the greatest center of all time. I think he's the most popular center of all time. I'm not sure if I'm ready to go greatest of all time. But we throw that around too much all the time, so it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think he is was very important to this team. I think it's going to be interesting to see it this season. And yeah, I think there's plenty of reason to have a little bit of concern. I'm not like overly concerned about this offensive line, but I want to see it. I could see it being a little bit worse this next season.
Yeah, it's that's kind of the thing with the Eagles. I feel like across the board offensively, it's like this is all really good, but it's like, what are you like the best at right now? I don't think there's anything. Again, they're tier twos across the board. Like that's great. You'd love to have that, but I think that's if we're talking about them as a Super Bowl contender, that might be what holds them back.
Yeah, I think I think I could definitely agree with that. And we saw, it sucks to say injuries, but it feels like one person, AJ Brown, is incredibly important to this team's success. Like, he is the one guy that, it feels weird to say. And Jalen Hurts is obviously very important too. I don't want to take that away because usually it is the quarterback goes down, the season's over. But it also feels like if AJ Brown goes down, the season's over. And that's kind of my issue.
And hey, I mean, you got Kenny Pickett as a backup now, so maybe season's not over if Hurts is down.
Yeah, I think it might be.
Okay, maybe so. Let's talk some defense now, because this Eagles defense was a bit of a mess last year, specifically the secondary. And they're the kind of team where if they have an issue, they're not just going to say, well, maybe it'll fix itself. They're going to make moves to try and fix it. So you still have Darius Slay and James Bradbury there. They're still on the roster. So, Slay, I didn't think Slay was bad last year. Slay wasn't as good as he usually is, but he was kind of the one guy who was like still all right last year. But the rest of it was tough. So they made some moves. They've added Quinyon Mitchell and John Cooper as players who hopefully they feel like can step up. You also have CJ Gardner-Johnson, my favorite player. They went back and brought him back into the mix, which have good years there, no denying that. So there is in the chip also. He's been a good safety for them. So there's a lot of options here. I think the question is just like, will some of these guys hit? Like they're doing the right thing, I think, secondary wise. They're not saying we need this player to be good. If one player takes a step back, they should be okay. But they do need one of these guys to step up. So I don't know. I think tier 3 coverage unit feels fair for me. I also don't love their linebackers at all, so that really hurts it. But I think I'm still willing to go tier 3.
Yeah, it's still a very bad coverage linebacker room.
Yeah,
that's the issue. Like,
and I think I'm gonna go tier 4. I think that's a real deal. That's a real problem.
I mean, we saw what it did last season.
Yeah.
I think people were over exaggerating a little, but it was still a really, really bad coverage unit in the linebacker room. And I hate to say it, I do think there is some positive traits about Devin White, but it's definitely not his coverage. So that's an issue, and we're gonna see how that works. But yeah, I mean, I really like Quinyon Mitchell. I was really high on him in the draft. I had him as a top 10 prospect. I think he could be really good. Asking him to do it year 1 is a lot. And obviously Cooper DeJean being hurt right now, I don't know how much he's going to contribute his rookie season. And then they got Ringo and stuff like that. Other guys that I've liked in the draft, but we'll see. But yeah, I could see Mitchell being really good, this being a good corner duo. But I still don't love the rest of it. We talked a lot about the linebackers. I don't love Reed Blankenship, and it seems like he's going to be back in the mix. And, there's still Sidney Brown. There's Avonte Maddox, who's a pretty good slot corner. And, yeah, I just don't love the rest of it. It feels like a lot of names rather than guys I'm expecting to contribute right now.
Yeah, so another feels like a Madden team.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how much I can really expect anything out of any of those guys except for Slay.
Yeah. Slay never had a bad year. That guy, like even when the defense is bad, he's put in. He's like one of those like actors, like I don't know, like Lakeith Stanfield. It's like every movie he's been in, like at least giving you like a solid like B+ performance.
Yeah, even if it's like that Haunted Mansion movie.
Yeah,
some of the defenses that Slay has played on with Detroit and Philadelphia might feel like that Haunted Mansion movie.
Yeah, and then all the reviews are still like, hey, Lakeith Stanfield, like still put in a good performance.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah. The defensive line is always worth talking about with the Eagles. I mean, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter as an interior. Jordan Davis had over 500 snaps last year. Kind of an underreported story, I feel like. You also have, for the edge, I mean, Bryce Huff, Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat. Maybe we get something out of Nolan Smith this year. I don't know. Either way, I really like this group. I'm going to go tier 2 run defense just because I still don't love the linebackers, but I'll go tier 1 pass rush because not only can they pass rush on the outside, they can on the interior as well.
Yeah. On paper, it's definitely a tier 1 pass rush. I'm not taking anything away from these guys. I think they're all there's a lot of individually great players with Huff, Sweat, Graham, and potentially Nolan Smith. We'll see. There are individually great players, but it wasn't great as a whole last season. I thought it was bad. It wasn't as good as we expected. So that was a bit of a problem. And then I think the interior, faltered a little bit. Granted, I think a lot of that could be saying they were trying to carry a weight for basically the entire defense, and the back half of this team let it down a lot. But it has to be better than it was last season, even though on paper I think it should still be very good up front.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think this is I'm gonna for the Eagles as a whole. I think they'll still be fine. I think the Eagles are going to be a good team. I'm going with an 11-6 prediction. I do think I worry a little bit about like what their ceiling is, and I also worry sometimes it doesn't matter how good your defensive line is if guys are getting open in a second and a half. So like you got to be able to cover at least somewhat well. And for linebackers, that really matters because when those guys are giving up, yards, it's quickly. So basically this whole segment comes down to we don't love the Eagles linebackers.
Still don't love it. I wouldn't have this team on a Super Bowl tier right now. I think that they're pretty clearly a cut below San Francisco and Detroit for me. We haven't got to those teams yet, so spoiler alert. But and I think there are a couple teams below them that I could see jumping them. What would let's put it this way. So the Eagles were kind of like the 4th team last season, right? I'm trying to remember. Yeah.
I think like the 4th.
They were the 5th seed, but they were the 4th best team in the NFC kind of view. Right?
Correct. And then they fell off a cliff. Tampa Bay won, but I think most people felt like throughout the year the Eagles were better.
Yeah. Do you think it's more likely they end up the 5th best team in the NFC or the 3rd best team in the NFC?
Ooh, well, so first you have Tampa Bay, so you gotta take that out. No, but I'm gonna have to go through I haven't done a deep dive into the other NFC teams yet, so it'll be a little bit tough. I don't think it's crazy to think that they could be a top 3 team. I think that especially, I think in general, I'm probably gonna say they have a better chance of being the 5th best team, just because like it is hard to be that good of a team. But part of me thinks about this in a more optimistic way of if the Cowboys are still the Cowboys. If you can get the secondary to just be solid this year, Niners might trade away Brandon Ayuk. If that happens, like if he's in the AFC, that changes the dynamic of the NFC. You still have the Lions to worry about, but if it's just one team you have to worry about, you can get to the end. So I don't think it's impossible that this Eagles team could go on a run. Although I do agree, right now I can't put them in a championship tier.
Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at too. I wouldn't be surprised by it, but at the same time, like I still think there are teams I like a little bit more. And I think there are teams coming up that I like a little bit more than where they're going. I think they're trending in the wrong direction, but they could right that ship and I wouldn't be shocked.
Kyle, you did not have the Eagles winning the NFC East. How many people do you think disagree with you? How many people said the Eagles would win the NFC East?
I'm going to guess it's like 38%.
You are off. It is 59% say the Eagles. It's not one of those complete landslides, but like it's like solidly people think the Eagles are going to win this division.
Yeah, that's a little high for me. I think these two teams are still razor close. Like we're going to talk about the Cowboys in a second. Like I don't think there's too much difference between these two teams. I think they're kind of in the same tier again. They were 3rd and 4th last year. I think they're going to be probably around that again.
Yeah. And I'll spoil the chart now just because I think it's a good lead into the Cowboys. It's possible we just have some Cowboys haters in this chat because, Kyle, somehow the Cowboys are 3rd in this. Only 15% have picked the Cowboys. The Commanders have 17%. Somehow more people are saying the Commanders will win the division than the Cowboys. Kyle, tell them why they're wrong.
All right, I'll tell you why you're wrong. Granted, I'm going to start this with saying I don't love this Cowboys team. I just don't. I like the last year's team a lot more. But we're going to talk about some things I do like. And I think one of the things I like about this team, what is your comfort food, Jackson? Tell me what your comfort food is.
I think a Mountain Melt from Miller's Ale House.
Miller. Okay, that's a very good pick.
Uh-huh.
I'm actually on a vegan diet right now, so this is killing
Oh,
me to say, but
sorry.
one of the things I do love in fast food is KFC. KFC is
Uh-huh.
reliable for me. It's delicious every time. That being said, the Dallas Cowboys are my KFC. It's not the best meal in the world. It's not the worst meal in the world. But at the same time, I know exactly what I'm getting out of the Dallas Cowboys. I'm probably going to get a 10 to 12 win team. I get a team that's probably not going to win a playoff game. And that's just what they are. I think it's going to be a very good offense. I think it's going to be a pretty good defense. And I think they have some of the same qualities. I think people are bored of the Cowboys, and that's why they're at that 15%. And I don't blame them, honestly, because they've been stuck in this good but not great tier for a while now. But they're still good but not great. And I think good but not great goes a long way. And I think they have some nice pieces. I think people, I think that Dak Prescott has some issues that are justified and criticisms that are justified. But that being said, he's coming off a career best year, and I don't expect Dak Prescott to drop off a cliff. I think they still have an elite wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb. I think they got some really good pieces on this team. And I think they're going to win 10 to 12 games, and I think they're going to make the playoffs, and they're probably going to lose that playoff game.
It's yeah. I mean, it's weird. We can start with the two people at the top. Mike McCarthy's kind of consistently been like a pretty solid head coach since he's been with the Cowboys, and Dak Prescott was just the second. Came in second in MVP voting last year, and like the whole talk with them is those two guys aren't good enough, and I kind of think that's fair. I think that's totally reasonable. I agree with everything that has been said.
Yeah. They're not good enough, but at the same time, it's one of those things, like, especially when it comes to Dak Prescott, like we have to have this conversation every year, right? And it's even more prevalent because the contract stuff has come up. And, I live in Dallas, so I hear a lot of Cowboys fans, and I have chats with a lot of Cowboys fans, and they talk about got to move on from Dak, got to move on from Dak. We can't keep doing this with Dak Prescott. And my thing with Dak Prescott is, like, if you're not doing it with Dak Prescott, not quite, not the best wording, but
it's okay. Go ahead. You're all right.
Yeah. If you're moving on from Dak Prescott,
tell us what happens if you're not doing it with Dak Prescott, please.
What is the solution is my issue. Because here's the problem. You're going to move on from Dak Prescott in the offseason. That's your choice. That's your prerogative. That's fine. You're still going to end up with a pick in the 20s probably, because that's where Dak Prescott's going to put you, which means you're not getting an elite quarterback unless you're trading everything in your, asset chest to move up into the place to draft an elite quarterback. And that's kind of what you have to do. You have to draft high to get a young quarterback. That's how you restart your cycle with your quarterback if you don't have the elite guy. And there's just not an elite guy on the market. And I just don't know how you can get a guy better than Dak Prescott on the market right now. And that's kind of the problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe that's why they added Trey Lance. Maybe they're going to see what he can do in the preseason. I don't know. You have Cooper Rush in the mix as well, I suppose. I mean, we've done the whole argument before. I think having Jacoby Brissett and $50 million would be better than paying Dak Prescott. But
he was second in MVP last year. Like,
yes, but I go ahead.
I get it. Like, I get it. There are problems, and you're probably not winning a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott, but you also can't, like, this guy is still very, very good. Like, this is a guy who, wins a lot of games. He's had success in this league and has nearly taken home the biggest individual hardware in the league. He almost did that last season. And honestly, if he won it, I wouldn't have questioned it that hardly. I thought he had a really, really good season. It'd be tough to move on after that just because of one playoff game.
Yeah, the MVP thing, I do have to say one thing. It was a historically down year for MVP voting, and also the defenses he played. He had a cakewalk of a schedule defensively. I mean, just look at his division, right? Like Washington, the Giants maybe had the best defense in that. Probably had the best defense in that division last year. It was tough. So, and I think the rest of his schedule was also pretty easy. Not to say he's not a good quarterback. He is a good quarterback. It's just he's not as good of a quarterback as some other guys. And I mean, let's just be honest too, not to make this whole thing about Dak Prescott, but he kind of melted down in that playoff game.
Yeah, he did. A lot of other stuff did go wrong, but he did melt down, and that's part of the problem.
Kyle, is CeeDee Lamb like the most underrated player in football? How did the Cowboys get an incredibly underrated wide receiver? What happened?
Not by me, he's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean he is incredible. I mean, and I mean he's on, obviously he has to show up to training camp now, but I mean this guy is one of the elite guys. He's one of the best receivers in the league. He is such a
Yeah.
difference maker on this team.
But he never gets talked about like with like Justin Jefferson and like Jamar Chase and stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong. I mean, he got off to a slower start than those guys, and part of that,
Yeah.
probably creates the notion, but I mean, look at what he's done the past 2 seasons. He's been that guy. He's incredible.
Yeah. Unfortunately, don't love the depth with this receiving room. I like Jake Ferguson for what he is. Brandon Cooks again is certainly just a role player at this point in his career, but still an effective role player. But one of those guys who sometimes you have these guys who just fall off a cliff after they're good, and sometimes a guy goes from like really good to just like an okay player for a while. That's kind of seems to be what Cooks is doing. I still don't love like maybe we'll get the Jalen Tolbert breakout season. I don't know. I'm not in love with this weapons room. You also for the running back room. I guess is he? Oh, is he just gonna start? Is he just gonna be their starting running back? It's tier 5 running back room. It is tier 4 wide receiver room.
Yeah, I can understand it. That being said, I think it's going to perform a lot better than that. Obviously, this team usually just has a really good offense. And honestly, if we get another 800-yard, like 7-touchdown season out of Brandon Cooks, like that's a success, right? Or even like 600, 700-yard season. I think that's a success. That's kind of what you need out of him. And then, yeah, the hope is one of these third guys kind of paying out. Although I do like Ferguson too. Rico Dowdle is the guy I'm looking at this season. I think he's explosive. I think he's really, fun when he has the ball. And I think he's going to get a lot of touches as kind of that, moving into that Tony Pollard explosive back role. And I wouldn't be surprised if he has a big season. It is a running back, so I'm not like adding too much to it, but I think he's a big play threat for this team this year.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes, but yeah, I mean, always good to have something like that. The offensive line is interesting too, right? Because you have two. I mean, okay, maybe the best guard tandem in the league, Tyler Smith and Zach Martin. That might just, I probably would be my pick. I would think. They drafted Tyler Guyton, a guy who I wasn't crazy about. Now, I wasn't crazy about Tyler Smith either. He's been fantastic for them. So, they know more than I do. He should, in their other tackle could be Terrence Steele. Kyle, this could be a really rough tackle group. It just could. And then when you have the center as well, Brock Hoffman or maybe Cooper Baby could be the guy. Baby was a 3rd-round pick. So I'm probably saying his name wrong. Beebe. Sorry, Cooper. Or do you go Brock Hoffman, the undrafted free agent? But yeah, it's I love the guards. This is I feel like I'm being harsh, but this is a tier 4 offensive line right now because that's really all they have.
Yeah, I think Steele's going to have a bounce back season, so I think you got 3 nice pieces there. It really just comes down, it is young at left tackle and center, but that being said, there's a lot of experience everywhere else, and I think that's going to be okay. I think they're going to be fine there, but I do, there are questions, and there are more questions than we've had in the past for Dallas Cowboys offensive lines.
Yeah, Steele was good 2 years ago, although I feel like in the 4 years he's played, that feels like it's been more of the exception to the rule. So there's hope he could bounce back, but I'm not one to bank on it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, yeah, I mean, like you said, this is a group that's usually very awesome, and it's objectively just not as awesome.
Yeah, we don't have for the defense. It's really interesting as well with this team because their defense historically has been very good as of late. I mean, you have the Dan Quinn stuff. Dan Quinn's gone, and I wonder what's going to happen. They also did lose Gilmore, who I know did not have a great playoff game, but had a good season for them. So I think they feel okay about it because Deron Bland was getting pick sixes left and right. And then you have Trayvon Diggs, which Kyle, this could be the corner duo that leads the league in interceptions, this year. And both guys have shown they can be capable cover corners as well. I know that's not the narrative with them, but like they definitely have shown that. Diggs had that one first year where he was kind of all over the place, but it's really developed nicely, although he's coming off an injury, and that's concerning. So you have that as well. For the safeties, Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson, Marquise Bell are the 3 guys who should be a very good safety duo or safety trio, I should say. A little concerned about some of the corner depth. I am like they need they need Bland and Diggs to be good, or this is a bad secondary. It just is. But I think those guys could be good. So I'm kind of in between tier 2 and tier 3. I just, how much I harp on depth. I think I'm going to, and plus with Diggs coming off an injury, I think I have to go tier 3.
I think it's justifiable. I do think it is a better cornerback duo than it's given credit for. Like you said, these guys have gotten better at coverage, it feels like, each year. And they were still young when they, when they got burnt a lot. And that should be more expected.
Yeah, to interrupt you a bit, just for the Diggs stuff, like Diggs' trajectory was basically exactly how like an elite corner's trajectory is, except he had a bunch of interceptions like too early, and that like led to a bunch of like insane discourse.
Yeah, the think piece is early, I think has clouded a lot of judgment. He is a very good player, and I think it is better. I do think that the stability that Gilmore brought will be questioned, but at the same time, I think they're both really good players. Like, they're obviously not going to get, 10 defensive touchdowns out of those two again. Like, that's just not going to happen. But I think they are boom or bust players, and I think that they still have a lot of boom compared to the bust. And I think the big thing, too, is I really like the safety room. Like, I think that really helps them, too, just because they had that coverage. I'm a big Malik Hooker fan. I think this is a really good – I think this is one of the better safety rooms in the league, and I think those two are really good. So I agree with you. I really like the starters. The depth, I do have some questions, but that starting, 5 when you include Bell, and, I mean, you can even throw Jordan Lewis in there as a nickel guy. I don't like him as much on the outside, but those 6 guys I feel confident about. It's if a Nashawn Wright or a Kalen Carson or something comes in, then I have some questions, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think that's my concern is like if Diggs just isn't the same guy after the injury, this team is screwed. Like they need him to come back and at least play all right.
Yeah. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't. It's not like he's like a 30-year-old having this injury.
It happens. Or what if Deron Bland last year was a fluke? Or like what if one of those guys gets hurt? It just gets hurt during the season. Like things happen.
Yeah, those things do happen. I agree with that, and I do think there are other concerns, and that's the depth question. That being said, I think some of those guys are just good, so we'll see. I'm willing to lean on that they're good players. Over everything else.
It could be awesome next year. It also could fall off the rails is kind of my point. The rest of the defense. So for linebackers, again, you have some of like, oh yeah, that guy. Like you have Eric Kendricks in the mix. You have Damone Clark as kind of the other linebacker here. So we'll see what can happen here. They did draft a guy in the 3rd round as well. Maurice Laflap. I think I liked him if I remember coming out of college, but I can't pronounce his name, so couldn't like him that much. You also, for defensive line, it's been the same old story for years now. Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence are, maybe the best edge tandem in football. It probably not as good as Highsmith and TJ Watt, but it's not too far behind. The interior is where things get a little, and even Sam Williams is a good rotational guy. Doesn't get that much playing time, but when he does get in, he can play well. Interior hasn't been as good. You have Chauncey Goldson, who could how many snaps is he going to give you is the question, but he did do some nice stuff last year. But you have Osa. Oh, I'm just not going to try to pronounce that last name. But, another guy who PFF was a big fan of last year, Mozzie Smith, who was atrocious last year. He was just terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked him coming out of college. It was a bad year for him. Again, you look at the Cowboys like rushing numbers, and they tend to be pretty good, but a lot of it is they do tend to put a lot of emphasis on stopping the run. They had single safety deep a lot and put a lot of stress on the corners. I'm not sure exactly, new regime, how would that go defensively, all that stuff. But I still don't love this run defense. I'm still going to be generous and give it a tier 4 run defense. Tier 1 pass rush, though. Pass rush is fantastic.
Pass rush is fantastic. It always has been. It will be again. I do like these linebackers. I do like Eric Kendricks. Like you said, they have some interesting players there. DeMarvion Overshone's another guy too, who had some real athletic, prowess in college and tore his ACL last season, so he missed his rookie year, or what was his rookie year. So he'll be back this season. I think he's a guy who still has a ton of talent that I really like. I'm interested to see him this next season. So I think that's a really nice group. I like Parsons, Lawrence. I like a depth piece in Marshawn Nealon. He was someone I liked in the draft too. I really can't believe they're doing this Mozzie Smith thing again. I don't know why they didn't find another piece here. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. But at the same time, we know what the Cowboys like to do. They want to score quickly. They want to get points on the board. They want to score a lot, and then they're going to use their secondary and they're going to use their pass rush, and that's how they're going to get after you. You know, they don't want you to run the ball on them, and that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, Kyle, I don't love this Cowboys team. I'm colder on them than you are. I think this team. I get that, like, in theory, they've kind of just spent the Cowboys. I do think that they've gotten a little bit worse, and I do think that for them having simply just a year go by, losing Tyron Smith, like, this hurts this team, in my opinion. I think losing Gilmore and Smith, that's not easy to replace, and they haven't really made much of an effort to replace those guys, other than just hoping some young players step up. I mean, again, we'll see about Tyler Guyton, we'll see about the corner situation. I'm going 9-8 for my prediction for this Cowboys team. Once again, as what happens every time we do this, I am not picking the Cowboys to win the division, and you are. Usually you're right about them winning the division. Usually I'm right about them not going far, although now you're also saying they're not going far. So we'll see.
Yeah, lost my expectations on that, but I still wouldn't be surprised if they win the division. It's going to be a fascinating year, and yeah, it's going to be fun. I think those two teams are going to be neck and neck again.
I do think that they have a better chance of winning the division than the Commanders, though. I'll say that.
That's an extreme take, and it really is. I'm surprised by the audience there. So, fun stuff though.
Yeah, it might just be a little bit of like if you're going to give the hot take, you're not giving the hot take to the Cowboys, you'll give it to the Commanders. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys are KFC. They're going to be. We know exactly what they are.
Yeah, you know what you're going to get. Absolutely. Can't say that. Oh wow, the Cowboys are really, really different this year. When's the last time since Dak Prescott has joined the team?
Yeah, I mean, even probably before that, it was the same thing with Tony Romo.
It's not that different. It was exciting when they were different names until we realized they were the same player.
Yeah, Jason Garrett and Mike McCarthy. It's basically the same. I mean, we're just rolling here.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Kyle, that is this division. Next week, we are going to the North. We're going to do the NFC North, which is a very fascinating division with the Packers, the Bears, the Vikings, and the Lions. Might be the best division in football. Who knows? Certainly a lot to talk about with two rookie quarterbacks, one who was kind of the breakout star last year, and then a team who was a couple plays away from going to the Super Bowl against a team they beat in the regular season in the Detroit Lions. So, a lot of fun to talk about next week.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. That's going to be very, very contested. A lot of different teams that also don't like each other, so should be fascinating. And we'll talk about it next week. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, there's not going to be a lot of these teams in the division. They're all big fans of each other. They all get along.
Yeah, you love the Saints. What are you talking about?
I would say NFC South is probably like everyone hates the Saints, and other than that, like there's not really a lot of like beef.
Yeah.
Like, if the Panthers won the Super Bowl, I'd be like, all right, like that's fine.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I can't imagine there's much animosity in the AFC South. Like,
possibly
when they had the Manning McNair years, like those two teams were really good. Like outside of that, like I just don't know if there's been a whole lot of like these two teams are playing for something interesting kind of thing. David Garrard was in the mix for those two teams too. I don't know.
Okay, yeah. Well, we can recap those years maybe on another podcast. Kyle, let them know where they can find us on Twitter before we head out.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter. That is at Jackson Kruger. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Gronin, and make sure to follow the account page at On the Sideline JK. That is at On the Sideline JK.
Of course, if you like audio only podcast, anywhere you get your podcast, search On the Sideline Podcast. We will be available there. Also, just should mention, hey, if you want to hear my thoughts on some of the preseason stuff coming up, I'm going to make videos about all that. So if you don't want to watch the preseason and just want to watch my videos, that's, I know some people do that. You can definitely do that. So be on the lookout for all that stuff as well. Kyle, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, we're all good. Let's get out of here. Looking forward to next week. And thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. We do appreciate it. And until next time, have a good one.
Peace.